welcome to the debate, and a special welcome to the Narrative Autopsy, TNA. Huge thanks to everyone joining us live right now, and a warm welcome to our dedicated audience joining us from YouTube as well.
Yes, absolutely. Glad to have you all here. Before we, pick up the scalpel today, do us a quick favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to join the TNA Bureau.
Right, because we are actually expanding our autopsies into dark series like dark and psychological animes like Death Note very soon. So secure your access to those files now.
Exactly. So today we are opening Case File 005, The Housemaid.
Yeah, and this isn't just your standard domestic thriller. It's a forensic study in psychopathy and manipulation.
It really is.
So imagine this. A woman locked in a pitch-black attic, right? She forces her abuser to extract his own teeth with a pair of pliers. It's pure visceral horror. But the real clinical question we have to answer today is who actually pulled the strings?
That's the crux of the whole case file, isn't it? Because when we look at a crime scene or a psychological profile, we naturally want precision. We want the forensic timeline to point to a clear perpetrator.
We want the binary comfort of victim and abuser.
Right, because it's clean. But when you step into Frida McFadden's The Housemaid, that diagnostic machine just completely shatters.
It does. Today we are dissecting the Winchester household. The narrative totally subverts the traditional domestic thriller by presenting this incredibly complex, just murky web of abuse and vengeance.
Murky is almost an understatement. I mean, it is an ecosystem of extreme domestic terror, and the shifting power dynamics force us to evaluate who holds the ultimate moral and psychological culpability. Is it the architect who orchestrates the trap or the executioner who springs it?
Exactly. Who is the real monster of this narrative's resolution? Well, I argue that Nina Winchester is the true psychological mastermind. She weaponizes another human being through calculated gaslighting, basically turning a desperate woman into a loaded gun.
And I look at the exact same evidence and see it completely differently. I argue that Millie, the housemaid, is the ultimate apex predator here. She takes her agency far beyond mere survival and actively embraces a dark, sadistic pathology that Nina never actually possessed.
To understand my perspective, we really have to look at the foundation Nina builds. We must acknowledge the initial incision, right? Her reality. She's undeniably a victim of her husband Andrew's sadistic abuse. He locks her in a sensory deprivation attic, starves her, and medically gaslights her into Clearview, a psychiatric hospital.
A living nightmare.
A complete nightmare. But her response to this profound trauma is not just to escape. Her response is to systematically groom and manipulate another vulnerable woman.
Well,
but wait, let's look at the behavior here. Nina doesn't just hire a maid. She deliberately hires a former convict. She hires someone who spent the last month sleeping in her Nissan.
Because she's desperate.
Right, but Nina does this precisely because Millie lacks credibility and resources. She knows Millie can't go to the police. From day one, Nina treats a human being as a disposable weapon. This level of calculated foresight, this emotional puppetry, it's the hallmark of a true psychological mastermind. She doesn't just set a trap, she builds the person who will walk into it.
I don't deny the manipulation, but framing it as some sort of predatory genius completely ignores the reality of a hostage situation. What you are calling predatory genius is actually desperate, reactive survival camouflage.
Survival camouflage?
Yes. Nina is a woman pushed to the absolute brink, trapped by a man with infinite resources and an airtight prenup. But if we were looking for the true monster of the text, the one who relishes the darkness, we have to look at Millie.
You don't think Millie was pushed?
She was pushed, sure. But look at how she responds when the dynamic flips. When Millie finally figures out the truth. When she gains the upper hand and locks Andrew in the attic, she doesn't call the authorities.
Well, she can't exactly.
She doesn't just secure her safety, pack her bags, and run. Instead, she engages in prolonged, calculated torture. She forces Andrew to pull out his own teeth with pliers and starves him for days.
Which is a reaction to the trauma.
It goes so far beyond self-defense, though. It reveals a dormant psychopathy that Millie fully embraces by the novel's end.
But to understand how Millie gets to that point in the attic, we have to look at the architecture of Nina's gaslighting. You can't just look at the pliers in a vacuum. The sheer cruelty of Nina's methods leading up to that climax is staggering. She actively destabilizes Millie's reality. Think about the sink cleaner incident.
Oh, the organic cleaner blow up. Right.
Yeah. Nina berates Millie for not using organic cleaner, projecting this image of a hyper-anxious, health-obsessed neurotic. She creates a hostile, unpredictable work environment.
It's a cover.
But meanwhile, Millie discovers Nina's medicine cabinet is full of heavy antipsychotics, like haloperidol.
Which is a very specific detail to leave out for Millie to find.
Exactly. And let's explain why that specific drug matters. Haloperidol isn't just a basic anxiety medication or a mild mood stabilizer.
No, it's a major tranquilizer.
Right, typically used for severe psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia. By planting that, Nina isn't just acting quirky. She's planting the clinical seed in Millie's mind that she is dealing with someone deeply unhinged and potentially dangerous.
It builds the narrative that Nina is losing her grip on reality. Yeah.
It does more than that. Nina acts like a narrative pathogen. And think about how a virus actually works. A virus doesn't just attack a cell from the outside. It enters the cell and, it hijacks the cell's own internal machinery to replicate itself.
That's an interesting way to frame it.
Nina does the exact same thing to Millie. She hijacks Millie's desperation for a job, her fear of going back to the streets, and uses Millie's own survival instincts against her. She makes Millie believe she is the only sane one in the house, culminating in that devastating moment where Nina publicly accuses Millie of stealing thousands of dollars of clothing.
The clothes she literally just gifted her.
Exactly. The psychological violence inflicted on Millie is immense.
I come at it from a different way, though. You have to look at who Nina is performing for. That erratic behavior, the haloperidol, the screaming over the PTA notes, the stolen clothes.
It's abuse.
I don't see that as sadistic abuse of Millie. It's necessary theater. Nina has to act unhinged because she is locked in a psychological chess match with a man who holds all the power.
So you're saying Millie is just collateral damage in a show put on for Andrew?
I'm saying the cruelty toward Millie is a survival mechanism designed specifically for Andrew's consumption. Andrew thrives on control, on superiority, and that savior complex of managing a broken woman.
Right.
Nina has to maintain Andrew's illusion of control, while simultaneously making him view Millie as the rational, attractive alternative. If Nina doesn't play the part of the crazy, jealous, impossible wife to perfection, Andrew never takes the bait. He never pursues Millie, and Nina never escapes. The entire performance is calibrated to Andrew's pathology, not Millie's vulnerability.
I hear that, but even if the performance is meant for Andrew, the collateral damage destroys Millie's life. Look at how Nina orchestrates the theater tickets.
The Plaza trip?
Yes. She deliberately gives Millie the wrong date for Showdown on Broadway, so that Millie and Andrew will end up spending the evening together alone, staying overnight at the Plaza. Nina effectively forces Millie into a romantic entanglement with her abuser.
It's a calculated risk.
She uses Millie's vulnerability to serve her up on a silver platter to a known sadist. Nina knows exactly what happens to women Andrew gets his hands on. That requires a level of emotional detachment that is terrifying.
Is it pure emotional detachment, though, or is it a calculated risk where she simultaneously leaves Millie the exact tools she needs to survive? We have to remember that Nina leaves the pepper spray in Millie's room.
A single can of pepper spray.
She suspects what Andrew will do, and she leaves Millie a literal lifeline.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because leaving a can of pepper spray doesn't absolve you of locking someone in a cage with a lion.
It doesn't absolve her, no. But it proves she isn't just blindly feeding Millie to the wolves. She is giving her a chance to flip the script, and this brings us to the crucial pivot. The shift from prey to predator in the attic.
The execution phase.
Exactly. Because once Millie uses that pepper spray and locks Andrew in the dark, the theater ends. We leave Nina's script and enter the realm of visceral horror authored entirely by Millie.
You're referring to the pliers.
Let's look at the mechanics of that moment, purely forensically. Millie is safe. The threat is neutralized. She has the heavy door locked from the outside.
Right, she has control.
Pliers, she walks all the way back upstairs and slides them under the door.
But it's a direct reflection of the absolute helplessness Millie felt. It's mirroring the helplessness Andrew inflicted on others.
Helplessness doesn't ask someone to mutilate themselves, though. Listen to the specific cruelty of her demand. She says, if you want to get out of the room, all you have to do is pull out one of your teeth.
It's brutal, yes.
And then she stays. She listens to him howl in agony on the other side of that heavy door. She watches him on the security camera, relishing his submission. If Millie is just a pawn acting out Nina's design, where does this extreme sadism come from? Nina never told her to do that.
Well, no, but
This is the behavioral red flag of an apex predator who is no longer just surviving, she is enjoying the execution.
again, you can't look at the pliers in a vacuum. Millie's extreme violence is a direct product of the environment Nina forced her into, combined with her own history. Millie's actions are the ultimate stigma of trauma.
A stigma doesn't pull teeth.
Let's look at her past. She spent 10 years in prison. She tells us early on, after a month of living in your car, you realize the importance of some of the little things in life. She is a woman who has been systematically stripped of her agency by society and then immediately stripped of it again by the Winchesters.
So her trauma justifies the torture?
I'm not saying it justifies it. It explains the mechanism of it. When she forces Andrew to extract his teeth, she isn't inventing a new pathology. She is operating under the exact rule of law that Andrew himself established.
The attic rules.
Yes. Who installed the heavy door? Who installed the locks from the outside? Who set up the pitch black sensory deprivation, the withholding of water, the impossible arbitrary rules? Andrew did.
So she's just administering his own medicine.
Precisely. When Millie tells him to put the heavy books on his genitals and stay there for 3 hours, she is enforcing the Winchester household's existing laws. She learned in the brutal environment of prison that the only way to survive a monster is to become a bigger one. She reflects Andrew's pathology back onto him with absolute terrifying clarity.
She reflects it, yes, but she radically escalates it. Have you considered the duration and the absolute lack of necessity in her actions? She keeps him in there for days.
It was a controlled environment.
Think about the physical and psychological toll of that, and look at the contrast between the two women when the dust settles. When Nina finally returns and finds the body, she is physically sickened. Nina leans forward and retches.
Right. She asks how long he's been there.
And Millie casually responds, 5 days? 6? I've lost count.
The detachment is chilling, I'll give you that.
There is a completely blank quality to Millie's voice. Nina, the supposed mastermind, is horrified by what her plan has actually unleashed. Millie, the supposed victim, is completely desensitized.
Well, she adapted.
The student hasn't just become the master, she has transcended the master's capacity for darkness. Nina couldn't stomach the reality of the attic. Millie moved in and made herself at home.
But notice who walks away clean at the end of the day. When we look at the epilogue and the untold motives of this entire narrative, we have to look at the clinical outcomes. Nina calls Detective Connors. She plays the role of the grieving widow to absolute perfection at the funeral.
She plays it very well, yes.
She feigns total ignorance about the bruises, the starvation, and the missing teeth, allowing the police to write it off as an accidental lock-in in a quote-unquote hazardous attic.
A very convenient hazard.
Unbelievably convenient. Nina walks away completely clean. She inherits Inger's vast wealth through the accidental death ruling, and she moves to California with her daughter to start a picturesque life. She orchestrated a murder, utilized a proxy executioner to do the dirty work, and suffered zero legal or physical blowback. That is the definition of a masterful, terrifying intellect. She won the game.
That's a compelling argument. But have you considered what she actually leaves behind? Did she win? Or did she just pry open Pandora's box and happen to escape before the monster inside consumed her too?
What do you mean?
Let's look closely at that epilogue. Nina moves to California, yes. But what does she do with Millie? She recommends her.
She gives her a job reference.
She gives her a target. The narrative shifts to Lisa Killefer's house. Lisa is wealthy, her kitchen is immaculate, but her hands nervously toy with a block of knives. The tension is palpable.
Right, the knife block.
And then Millie sees it.
a dark purple bruise on Lisa's upper arm, specifically in the shape of somebody's fingers. Millie realizes in that instant exactly why Nina recommended her for this job. And Millie says, "I believe I can help you."
Which proves my point. Nina is still orchestrating the ecosystem from afar. She is dispatching Millie to do what the law won't.
But look at what Millie has willingly become. Nina escaped the trauma. She is sitting on a beach with Cecilia. But Millie allowed the trauma to become her core identity.
She found a purpose.
She isn't a desperate woman living in a Nissan anymore. She is fundamentally transitioned into a specialized serial vigilante. She is essentially advertising her services as an assassin for abused wealthy women.
Well, assassin is a strong word, but
She accepts the job not to clean Lisa's house, but to eliminate Lisa's husband. Nina may have drawn the blueprint in the Winchester house, but Millie has decided to make a career out of being the monster in the attic. She isn't a victim enforcing household rules anymore. She is actively hunting.
is she hunting or is she providing a necessary, albeit incredibly dark, societal function that the justice system fails to provide? Let's zoom out and remember why Nina couldn't just go to the police in the first place.
Because Andrew had them in his pocket.
Exactly. When she tried to expose Andrew, what happened? He used his wealth and standing to convince the authorities she was delusional. He leveraged her postpartum depression and a staged incident to lock her in a psychiatric hospital for 8 months.
He weaponized the medical and legal systems against her. I agree with that.
Right. The terrifying takeaway here isn't just that Millie becomes a monster. It's that in a system where wealth and power shield abusers, society practically demands the creation of monsters to correct the balance.
I see what you're saying.
The traditional avenues of justice were entirely foreclosed to Nina. By referring Millie to Lisa, Nina is recognizing that the system is broken and she is deploying the only weapon she knows actually works. Nina remains the mastermind of this vigilante network because she understands that monsters are the only things that scare other monsters.
But the mechanism of that network relies entirely on Millie's willingness to abandon her own humanity. The tragedy of the housemaid isn't just that Andrew abused his wife. The profound tragedy is that to stop him, 2 women had to completely dismantle their own moral compasses.
Well, yes.
You argue that Nina is the mastermind because she drew the blueprint. But a blueprint is just paper until someone is willing to pick up the hammer, or in this case, the pliers.
But you need the architect as much as the builder.
But the builder is the one with blood on her hands. Millie crossing that line, losing count of the days a man is starving to death in a pitch-black room, that requires a profound internal darkness that Nina simply does not possess. Nina couldn't do it.
Because she's not a killer.
Exactly. We know this because Nina locked the door once, felt sick, and let him out, which resulted in her being trapped again. Millie didn't hesitate. She didn't feel sick. She felt powerful.
Which is exactly why Nina selected her. Nina's diagnostic genius was recognizing her own psychological limitations. She knew she couldn't pull the trigger, so she found an instrument that did not share her hesitations.
But an instrument that relishes its function is no longer just a tool. It becomes an independent threat. When Millie meets Lisa in that epilogue, she doesn't do it out of blind loyalty to Nina. She does it because the power she felt in that attic, the power of watching an untouchable, wealthy sadist beg on his knees and pull his own teeth, was intoxicating. That's why Millie is the true monster of the resolution. She didn't just survive the dark, she found her calling in it.
Well, when we synthesize all of this, looking at the entire behavioral landscape of the Winchester household, my position remains grounded in the origin of the plot. Nina Winchester's calculated grooming, her ability to gaslight both her husband and her employee, and her use of a proxy to secure her absolute freedom and wealth, makes her the narrative psychological mastermind. She wrote a brilliant, brutal script. Millie merely read the lines.
And my position remains that a script doesn't force an actor to pull out someone's teeth. Millie's escalation into sadistic torture, her complete desensitization to prolonged human suffering, and her eager acceptance of a new target in the epilogue cements her as the story's true predator. She took Nina's script and turned it into a slaughterhouse.
We can debate the mastermind and the executioner all day, but I think we inevitably converge on one undeniable truth here.
Neither of these women ends up in that attic without Andrew Winchester. He is the ultimate catalyst.
Exactly. He is the original sin of the narrative. The source material brilliantly demonstrates how profound trauma leaves these indelible psychological stigmas on its victims. Andrew created a physical and emotional environment where survival required psychopathy,
He built a machine designed to crush women.
and was ultimately ground up in its gears. He pushed Nina until she learned to manipulate without conscience, and he pushed Millie until she learned to torture without remorse.
It forces us to reflect on an incredibly unsettling reality. In environments of extreme domestic terror, the line between victim and monster is often completely erased. When the law fails and survival is the only imperative, traditional morality becomes a luxury neither Nina nor Millie could afford.
It requires these multiple perspectives to truly diagnose the moral fallout of the story. The shifting power dynamics in this text offers so much to explore regarding human survival instincts, and perhaps more frighteningly, the dormant capacities for violence we all might harbor under the wrong circumstances.
Which brings us back to where we started. We wanted a clean diagnosis. We wanted to look at the psychological X-ray and easily point the villain and the victim. But the housemaid leaves us in diagnostic muddy waters. Who is the true monster? The one who builds the trap or the one who smiles while it snaps shut? What is your final diagnosis? Are you team maid or team wife? Leave your verdict in the comments.
Yes. Let us know your thoughts.
Case file 005 is now closed. Prepare for the next autopsy. Stay sharp.